This girl's got
French.
a crazy one. Yeah, okay.
French? All right. Crazy one. Okay. Well, good. So hopefully that gives our panelists a little bit of an idea of who's in the room. So if we could get started, if everyone could just introduce themselves and tell us your name, where you currently work, a little bit about very briefly about what you do, where you currently work, and then what is your academic background. So what your degree was in or degrees were in and where you received them. Is that okay? All right. Do we want to start right here? Ladies first. No, I switch it up.
My name is Lindsay Lyle, and I'm the administrative attorney for the United States District Court of the Eastern District of Tennessee. It's a long title. But I'm basically general counsel for the clerk's office. So I work for the clerk of the court and the judges, and I basically give kind of like legal advice and make sure that everything that we're doing is compliant with the laws and regulations. I actually started out as pre-med, which is a lot of lawyers' stories, but I hated calculus, so I switched to history, which I really enjoyed, and so I graduated with a history major from here, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, thought to go the professor route, but I took a year off and I worked for an attorney who I really liked and had an enjoyable experience with her, and so I took the LSAT and ended up at UTK Law, and still here.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay. All right.
All right. Well, hi guys. I'm Michael. I work in Congressman John Duncan's office. So my main areas there are it's constituent relations in the Knoxville office. So we only deal with constituent matters. So it's basically helping people with their issues. And my main areas are immigration issues, labor issues, tax. Those are kind of the three big ones. And I actually completed my political science coursework here. So I'm a new graduate, probably similar ages to most of you here. So I'm kind of just getting started myself, but I think that about covers it.
Good. I'll ask more about how you got to your current roles in a little bit. So
I'm not as similar in age as I once was, as Michael is, but I'm Nick Bradshaw from the city of Knoxville. The Deputy Director over our Fleet Services Department. Fleet Services has approximately 55 employees, and we manage the City of Knoxville's fleet of vehicles with approximately 1,500 units of equipment, from fire trucks to police cars to all the other vehicles and equipment that the city uses to provide services every day. I graduated from UT Chattanooga with a BA in History, BS in Political Science a few years ago. Came here and earned a master's in public administration. And then more recently went back to school to get an MBA in HR management, which I just finished from Bryan College.
good. Thank you. All right.
All right, and I'm Will Brewer. I am an attorney. I started my own practice, so I work for myself, which is pretty great. I got my English and political science degrees here in 2011, and then jumped across the street, went to law school here, and graduated in 2014.
Great. Okay. So what I would ask next is tell us a little bit about the day-to-day of your job. What can someone, if someone was interested in a role like yours or a role similar to yours, what could they expect?
I'll be honest, when I accepted the job, I had no idea what it was going to really entail day to day. But it has been pretty interesting. Sometimes a little more tedious than other times, but it's all sorts of things. My job is pretty expansive, I guess. Day to day, I deal a lot with, I overlook all the attorney discipline matters. So when there's a complaint made against an attorney, or if they're suspended in Tennessee, I'm the one that drafts the order and gets it approved by the chief judge. And then another thing that I do day to day is when an attorney is appointed to defend a defendant who can't pay for an attorney, they have to submit these vouchers for payment. So I process those vouchers and make sure that what they're claiming is correct. But then I also do a lot of policy stuff. So when we're implementing programs or just the way the court operates, I'm sort of like a let me call 8 different people and figure out what everybody needs, and then see if we can legally do it, and then make the plan, and so I do a lot of that, which has been different for me, but I've actually enjoyed it a lot. And then I also draft a lot of local rules and HR manuals and different manuals, which is but then I also get to do the training, which I do. I enjoy the training, so.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Was this your first job out of law school? Or?
No, it was not.
Okay, can you tell us what the path that you took sort of
Well, when I was in law school, I had a I clerked for a local law firm, and I had always intended to get involved somehow with government law. I kind of knew that's the path I wanted to take. But when I was in law school, it wasn't the greatest economy, and they offered me a job pretty quickly when I was clerking for them, so I accepted it. And with the government, you either kind of have to go into the honors program straight out of school, or you have to get 1 or 2 years of experience in private before you can start applying for government jobs. So I knew it was still kind of a backup, so I went ahead and gave the private practice a year or 2. And I liked it, but I still just knew if I didn't try this other area that I would be really disappointed. So I started applying all over the country after I had my 2 years of experience, and ended up here. So it worked out.
Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day?
Of course. So similar to Lindsay, I really had no idea of what I was signing up for as far as what that first day would look like, what my responsibilities would look like. So all legislation is handled in DC, and I think that's the case for most congressional offices and senatorial offices. So like I said, all we do in the Knoxville office is constituent casework. So my day usually starts out, it's pretty, I mean, it depends if Congress is in session, that kind of has a bearing on what our day looks like, and then whether or not he's in the district, that kind of depends what the day looks like. But usually it's standard 8:30 to 9:30, sorting through emails, seeing what I've missed from the day before, and then from that point, I'm just reviewing cases that we have open with constituents, and it's really start to finish. So the constituents will write us, explain the issue, and then I'm the person in my assigned areas. I work with our congressional liaisons at each agency to kind of troubleshoot those problems, figure out what options that they might have available to resolve the matter. So it's planning for constituent meetings. We'll have folks coming in to kind of go over their case, and then it's just on the phone with folks from Nashville, with folks from DC, and kind of just discussing all the details of the cases. And then if he's in the district, the congressman, sometimes I will go with him to different events, kind of a body man, taking photographs, driving in different places, and then if Congress is in session, that's of course when the phones are much more vibrant and ringing, and there are some days where it's just constantly answering phones, and we're logging those opinions so that the congressman can review those. So that's kind of just the broad.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Of course.
Now, is this your first job out of college, or first full-time? Was this your first stop, or?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
So I started in the office as an undergrad
Okay.
in April of 2015. So I actually started as an intern, and luckily the congressman and the staff there were flexible enough. They allowed me to complete my degree while, kind of having flexible office hours. So it started as an internship and transitioned into a permanent position.
Got it. So the internship was your foot in the door there.
Very much
Okay.
so, yes.
Thanks. All right, Nicholas, can you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day, and then, I'm going to ask a follow-up question.
Well, it varies a lot. I guess mostly it's personnel management now. Our department, the fleet department, has several locations in the city. There's a light engine repair shop that works on cars and has a staff of mechanics. There's a heavy shop that works on heavy equipment and has a staff of mechanics. We run an impound lot for vehicles that are impounded. Hope we don't see anybody there. And we have an office downtown with our administrative team. So I try to stay in touch with all the employee groups in all our locations and make sure things are running smoothly. So there's some travel during the day, just bouncing around a lot and troubleshooting as issues arise, helping customers that may have an issue with a piece of equipment, and working with our finance team, city county building to purchase new equipment, which is a very involved process. With you can't just go to the store and buy a fire truck, right? There's a bid process, and there's a lot of regulations and things that are involved, pretty labor intensive to purchase a piece of equipment, actually. So I'd say yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so you have your MPA, MPPA?
It was before they made the change.
Before that, okay. Your Master's of
You're dating
Public
me now.
Administration,
Yeah.
okay. So I know that you've had a couple of different
Yeah.
roles. Could you tell us about the progression, sort of, when
Sure.
you first got out and how your career has progressed?
Yeah. Actually, I got on with the city just a few months after I completed my graduate degree. I think I graduated in December 08 and started in April of 09 with the city. And I was in the building inspections department, where I was an administrative technician, which does payroll and accounts payable and receivable. Good place to start. From there, I went to the Human Resources office, where I was an HR analyst for several years, just troubleshooting employee issues, grievances, disciplinary issues, and hiring and firing. That's what HR does, right? So did a lot of that and training, workforce development. From there, I've been in 4 departments. My 3rd department was the public service department, where I did planning and safety. It's the department, about 300 employees. It does all the actual brush pickup, salt the roads, pick up the leaves, that sort of thing, the manual labor. Tried to keep things running there and smoothly, make sure services were delivered on time and effectively, and everybody was safe when they were doing it. And that led to the mayor appointed me Deputy Director of Fleet Services in May of this year, just a few months ago.
Great, thank you. All right, well, so tell us a little bit about your day-to-day.
Yeah, so every day is kind of different. So I practice in several different areas. So I do a little criminal defense, a little estate planning, which is basically writing people's wills and setting up trusts and things like that. I do a little bit of debt collection law, and then I also lobby for a nonprofit organization when the legislature's in session in Nashville, which is usually January to April, early May. So in the winter, I'm on the road 2 or 3 days a week to Nashville. Either I'll spend the night or I'll go back and forth. And so I'm in the halls of the legislature lobbying legislators to pass the bill that we want to pass or to not pass the bill that we don't want passed. Testifying in front of hearings that they have about different bills. So that, and then in the off days, it's like it is the rest of the year. I go to court, and most of my criminal defense clients come from indigent representation. So when they say, if you can't afford a lawyer, one will be given to you, that's me. So I go and I'll go to court, and the judge will appoint poor defendants to me and other attorneys, and the state will reimburse me for my services. So I'm talking to clients, going to jail to meet with clients, things like that, and then in court for hearings and plea negotiations with the DA. It hardly ever goes to trial, so it's not that exciting, but always good for a cocktail story with the crazy people that you represent from day to day. And then if not that, then I'm in my office meeting with people, talking about what they want to put in their wills or things like that, and then going to court on other issues. And then the unique thing with my position is, since I'm on my own, I keep my own books, accounting-wise. I write my own client correspondence. I keep track of my own hours. So usually things on TV shows, they're only ever in court, and then they're drinking wine at the end of the day. I manage my own books and things like that usually you would have an assistant do. So that's kind of the part that you don't go to law school for, but it's an interesting part nonetheless.
And so you have your own shop, basically.
Yep.
Was that your first stop out of law school, or?
That was my first stop out of law school. It was not what I set out to do. I graduated with Lindsay, so the economy was terrible.
Yeah.
I was the last class into law school before the economy really tanked, so it was too late to turn back. The student loan bills were already coming due. So it was not what I wanted to do. Between undergrad and law school, I spent 5 years interning with the Knox County DA's office. I really wanted to be a prosecutor and be on that side of the criminal bench. But that didn't turn out. When I graduated, because the economy was so bad, first of all, law firms and other places like that had really scaled back their hiring of young attorneys, but also because the market was so bad, attorneys that had been in practice for 10 or 20 years were grasping at straws for new jobs because they were so sick of their current jobs. So like I would interview at a DA's office, and instead of hiring me for the entry-level salary, they would hire somebody from some other county who had 20 years of experience for an entry-level salary. So that's who I was competing with day to day. So I kind of just thought, screw it, I'm gonna start my own firm. So that's what I did, and I was terrified to do it. It's not at all what I wanted to do. It's kind of an uncertain thing starting out to not know where your next paycheck is coming from. But once you kind of get your foot in, the snowball kind of, you go from 1 client to 2 clients to 10 clients, and then, you're good to go. So it was definitely stressful at first, and it definitely comes with its stresses. There are wet seasons and dry seasons, but it's been a great surprise to me. I don't have to deal with managing partners. I don't have to have a billable hour quota that I have to meet. I'm not working 14 hours a day like some of my friends are. So it gives me a lot of great flexibility, which is kind of offsets the uncertainties and the stresses of being on your own.
Good, thank you. So my next question is, if students are interested in careers in government, politics, and law, what experiences would you recommend that they get involved in as undergrads? That could be specific classes, that could be internships, volunteering, what part-time jobs, anything that you think might be something good for them to get involved in. You can speak from your experience or just what you wish you had done, whatever you prefer. Yeah.
I was the worst because I had 0 experience and now I expect to be an attorney.
Sure.
Like you'll go to law school and everyone's like, I wanted to be an attorney since I was 3.
Yeah.
So I've done all these mock trials and I never did any of that. So somehow I learned to sell my talents even though I didn't have the normal experience. So I will say that, like even if you decide that's what you want to do and you might be intimidated by these other people with these longer resumes and they've been interning and doing all this other stuff, figure out what you can sell that's individual about yourself. I rode horses a lot growing up, like competitively, and so I sold my work ethic on that because it was a very hard, like it was every day after school, 3 hours at the barn, couldn't put it down, on the road for travel and blah, blah, blah. So I use that as sort of a selling point, some of my other experience. So if you can just find something unique about yourself and use it, that's helpful. Tie it into what you're trying to apply for. But if I could do it over, I would probably try to do some kind of, I don't know what they call it because I never did it, but back in college, like doing some of the mock trials or doing some of the more political and legal activities that they do have available in college. I just had no idea that that's where I was going to end up, so that's why I didn't do it. But
that's okay. Thank you for sharing. That's good. I mean, it's good to hear all the different perspectives of where people have been. All right, Michael.
Yeah, so we all know how important internships are. It's kind of, we start hearing at late high school, start in college, first year students, second year students, we know how important internships are. And it's pretty much like depending on how long your internship is, it's a 6-month job interview or it could be a year-long job interview, because in those internships you're working closely with those key people, the senior staff who are really seeing your work ethic. For me, I actually, back 2013-14, I volunteered on the congressional campaign for John Duncan. So I was his Grandview County field rep, and I I remember those first campaign meetings I went to, I was easily the youngest person in the room by 25 years. There aren't a ton of people who are just out there looking for these political positions. I think a lot of us, we're kind of in our bubbles and we have our political friends, but we're definitely a small minority because there are more opportunities out there than I think people realize. So that experience as his field rep on his campaign was almost like the predecessor to my congressional internship. I expressed interest in it as a high school senior, and they pretty much told me they were filling the internships with college-age students, and that if something became available, they would let me know. So that was really it. I went probably 6 to 7 months before I heard back from them. Wasn't expecting it. The chief of staff just called saying that they were looking to bring in an intern, and he kind of signaled that it could maybe transition into a part-time position if things worked out. So that's kind of how it worked out for me, and it was the volunteer position on a campaign, which there's not a single political campaign that I'm aware of that will not accept your volunteer services. Especially 2018, it's a very big year in Tennessee politics. You've got the governor's race, open Senate seats, my boss's House seat, local House and Senate races. So there are a lot of candidates out there who want young people like us who are energetic and enthusiastic and have a good work ethic. So if that's something you're interested in, even if it's like for me now, I work in this congressional office, which is separate from campaign work. That's really where you can kind of establish that working relationship with a candidate. If your candidate wins, you would probably be in a good position to apply for a congressional or whatever position it is.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Nicholas, so tell us a little bit about the experiences that you would recommend students get if they're interested in local government work, state level, whatever.
Yeah, for most local governments, I think there's nothing more important than building a network, honestly. There's a lot about the people that goes into that. Being involved in any shape, way, or form in meeting people, and then maintaining those connections with people that you do meet, that you might need later down the road. Knoxville's a little unique, the city, in that they have a civil service system, so they make merit-based appointments, meaning you have to go sit and take an exam, and whoever finishes the best on the exam gets an interview. Most government jobs are not like that, especially in counties and smaller municipalities, where a great deal of it is who you know, which is unfortunate, I think, in some regard, but it's the truth. So I would recommend developing a network and getting to know people, and having people get to know you. If you're interested in a career in Knoxville, I'm really proud of the system we have in Knoxville, where we make merit-based appointments based on aptitude and ability, which is great. So study. And of course, the test will get you in the door. Usually the top 5 scorers on a test get an interview. That's the rule. So if you don't do very well on the test, you're not going to get in the door. And then once you're in there, you got 4 competitors who are as good as you are, generally speaking. So work on your interview skills, your interpersonal skills, and as Lindsay said, try to find something that makes you stand out and something that the interviewer can relate to, and sell yourself.
Question: the civil service exam, how is that scored? Do you know? And what is typically on it?
Yeah, they're all a little different. They're actually there's anybody here in HR management? Anybody? There's a thing called the job analysis.
Okay.
Or, position description questionnaires, and they use that to make a job analysis, which is to quantify it. And then so the exam, the questions will be based on whatever the results of the job analysis are, which is what I used to do when I was in HR. Yeah, okay. I used to make tests. So they're all a little different. There's some of them are little bubbles with 100 questions in some bubbles, and there's performance-based tests. If you're for KBD and KFD, both have a performance-based test in addition to a written test. You're going to drag a dummy a certain amount of yards and lift a certain amount and arm endurance and some things. For equipment jobs, you have to go operate the equipment. You got to go operate a pothole patcher and patch a pothole when you're graded on that. So.
Okay. Thank you. So, Will, what experiences would you recommend? What things would you recommend that students get involved in? And can I follow up by asking, you said you interned with the DA's office. How did that opportunity arise?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that would be, I mean, it doesn't have to be the DA's office, but get an internship. And I know that that's obvious, but minion work is not overrated. Just do whatever you can, because the internship is not the thing that you are doing in your job. It is the environment that you've been put in. So funny enough, so sophomore year of college, I decided that I wanted to, I had already decided that I wanted to go to law school, and I knew it was because I was ambitious and I liked English and poli-sci, so, 2 + 2 = 4. But I didn't know why I wanted to be a lawyer or what kind of law I wanted to go into. So I started calling different law firms in Knoxville, just asking if they needed a runner, which is you run files to different law firms or, mail to the post office or whatever, and they fill those jobs with college students. So it turns out that the former vice chancellor for communications at UT, I met her one day, and we had gotten to talking, and I just I didn't really know her story or who she was, but in talking, I had mentioned that I was calling all these law firms and whatever. Her husband was the number 2 guy at the DA's office, so she placed a very well-placed call to her husband, who had his secretary email me, and I really lucked into that position, but they hired tons of college students. So I knew the woman that was in charge of the internship program. She still works there. I don't know if she's still in charge of the internship program, but I can certainly give you her email address if that's something that you're interested in. That was one of the best experiences of my life, just because it was world-changing in terms of my view of the law and what it was. You watch shows like The Good Wife and all of these shows that make law firms look glamorous, and Law and Order's exciting, and they finish a case in 60 minutes, but you don't ever get to see the nitty-gritty of the job. So what I would do is I would go and make copies and file files alphabetically and all that kind of stuff, which isn't exciting. But on my lunch breaks, I would go down to court and watch trials and hearings and all of that. And at the time, there was a really famous murder trial that was going on. It was the most famous probably in 20 years in Knoxville. So I would go, and there were 4 different defendants. So I would go every day for like 2 years, because every day I would go, there'd be a different guy on trial, and I would just soak it in and watch the lawyers and watch the evidence and all of that stuff, and it was just really good experience. So whatever internship you're gonna do, minion type work, but go for the experience and go for the connections, and it'll pay off. In terms of school, if you're gonna take the LSAT and you have the money or can get the money, take a class. If you're a great test taker, good for you. I'm not a good test taker. So I took a Kaplan class. It was invaluable to my LSAT score. Whether or not you're a poli-sci student, doesn't matter. Take all of the con law classes and the criminal law classes. They will teach you how to read a case, how to analyze a case, how to write an essay for an essay test based on case law. That will be a great experience for law school that you can't get anywhere else in UT. And then just another thing that I never did but wish that I had, if it's not going to hurt your GPA too much, take an econ class or an accounting class or some kind of business class. Because I had 0 business experience going into law school, and a lot of those classes are not criminal law or trial practice. They are financial law, business law, transactional law that I had no basis for, and really wish that I had done a class. And a lot of the people that you go to law school with have been out working for 3 or 4, 10 years before they go back to law school. I went straight in, so they had banking experience and real estate experience and all that kind of stuff that I didn't have. So kind of diversify your course load if you have time, and it won't hurt your GPA too much.
Thanks. So I'm going to have 2 separate questions. I have one question for Lindsay and Will, and one question for Michael and Nicholas. So I'll start with y'all. What is your sense of kind of bachelor's versus bachelor's and a master's in terms of working in government and politics specifically, and some of the roles that are similar to yours? Do you need a master's? What kind of jobs can you get with a bachelor's degree? Where do you see that line being drawn, and what are your recommendations for students?
So it depends on what you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, I felt like it was important to get a master's degree. I got 2 of them, but it depends on the field. There's a lot of very good jobs where you don't need a master's degree. There's a lot of good jobs you don't need a bachelor's degree. Honestly, I'm trying to hire mechanics right now, and it's you go to a tech school for a couple of years and you can make in the mid-40s coming out of school, 40,000, which is pretty darn good for a young person. But they don't grow on trees. It's really hard to find mechanics. So that's what I recommend you guys.
If you think like program management,
Yeah.
program administration kinds of positions,
Yeah.
what do you typically see your colleagues' backgrounds?
In the HR office, everyone had a graduate degree. It's never mandatory, but it certainly helps you. I probably wouldn't have gotten ahead if I hadn't had one. I'll say that. And now most schools most positions, even management positions, only require a bachelor's degree. That's on your minimum requirements, on the job description. But having a graduate degree is invaluable. I feel shows a lot about your work ethic. I think it's a good thing to have in your back pocket. Law enforcement, even law enforcement is getting to be a much more professional. Can you say professional profession? But yeah, the criminal justice degree programs have really blossomed in a lot of schools. The workplace is a lot more professionalized than it used to be with certifications and degree positions. That's across the board, and mechanics, as I mentioned before, don't need a bachelor's degree, but you do need some sort of degree. And there's a variety of certifications. You get professional certifications, which are also very important for whatever field of study you're in. When I was in HR, I got a PHR and a SHRM CP certification. So those are also, they can be as important as a graduate degree, depending on the profession you're interested in.
Michael?
So, in congressional offices, I'm not saying this is the case for every single congressional office, because it's not, but in our office at least, and what I've seen in a lot of the offices that I've worked with, so many young people want experience on the Hill, or technically I'm not on the Hill, I'm in the district office, but it's pretty similar as far as entry-level positions on the Hill. I don't think you have to have a master's degree to have experience on the Hill. Most of those who do have some kind of graduate degree. It's your legislative directors, it's your chiefs of staffs, district directors. It's those senior level positions where a lot of the people have graduate degrees. If that's something that you're interested in and you do want, a 30, 40 year career in some type of legislative office, then a graduate degree is probably the way to go. But if you are just wanting that Hill experience, in our Knoxville office and then the DC office, it's mostly young people that are fresh out of college. There are some in DC who are going back to get their graduate degree while working on the Hill. And it's kind of a secret that I didn't find out until after I was kind of on the payroll. But there are a lot of incentives for like House employees and Senate employees. There are a lot of like student forgiveness programs, which is a wonderful thing. So if you commit to stay in the House office for a year, they'll pay like so much of your student loans off, and that's an amazing thing. So that's kind of like the hidden secret for a lot of people. But you know, it's graduate degrees for senior level positions, and then for the Hill experience, you know, it's pretty standard. Most people are just out of undergrad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So,
Taking my role.
for Nick and Michael, from what you've seen, are there positions available where if you get your master's straight out of college, you can leapfrog? Or Nick, like the path that you took, you did your job for a couple of years, then you went back and got a master's. Are you going to have to do that no matter? Are you going to have to start out low and work your way up, whether or not you have a master's starting out, or would a master's have leapfrogged you past some of the jobs that you, and Michael on the Hill, would that leapfrog you to a legislative director, or will you still have to be an intern, then a constituent services, then a...
Well, I can tell you my experience, which is exactly what you said. But I did start out in as an administrative technician job, which was a sort of lower mid-level clerical type position with the city. I had a master's degree at the time. That was during the economic downturn we've already discussed.
Yeah.
So I was competing with some pretty, but I was only there for a year and a half, and then moved up. So yeah, it's a lot of it. I wouldn't have got in if I hadn't had a master's degree, because I was 24. I mean, I wasn't more qualified than a lot of these people. But I got in, and I think the master's degree got me that job, that entry-level job, and I paid my dues for a short time and moved up fairly quickly.
What's so interesting about congressional offices is that each member has his or her own hiring authority. There is not one, I'm sure there are basics that each office follows, but it really is up to the member who he employs. So in our office's example, a lot of those positions are based on kind of seniority, and it seems like what I've heard and understand from, he's been in Congress for 30 years, a lot of those senior level positions, it's kind of like you work your way up. Perhaps it's just a coincidence that those who now are in those senior level positions do have those advanced degrees. But I think it really just depends on the member. In our case, it's really been by seniority. And the thing too, what's unique about congressional offices, most of the people that are in those offices are from the district that the member represents. So I can see how it would really change the dynamic if this chief of staff interviewed all these like LDs, legislative directors. I wouldn't see him hiring a legislative director from like Utah. Like it's going to be someone that's probably in the district, that's familiar with the district, and just changing that office dynamic. That's why I see a lot of them kind of just work their way up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I would also say and echo sort of in general, a master's degree alone typically isn't going to get you the job. It's a master's plus experience. So for some people, the right path is to get a bachelor's, work a little bit in the field they're interested in, then go back and get their master's. Other people, if they go straight through their master's, that typically is not going to leapfrog them to that higher level job. They may still start in a more entry level, possibly not master's required position, but then be able to advance. So it's just something to think about, and you're exactly right. So my other question, Lindsay and Willie, you mentioned, the economy when you graduated from law school. That was around my era too. I didn't go to law school, but I know that feeling. So it was not super great. Thinking about now, So if I was a junior thinking about law school, so it would be about, 3-4 years before I graduated. Has it changed? What do you see the landscape look like in terms of legal hiring?
So the legal market has shifted for good. When the economy first took a turn, people thought, okay, this is cyclical, it'll be bad for a few years, and then it'll work its way back up. But what big law firms primarily figured out was we can hire a lot less people for a lot less money, and they can still do all of the work that we need them to do, and we're spending less money. So this is really a great thing for our bottom line, is that we're not hiring as many people and we're not paying them as much, but they're still doing all the work that we need them to do. So really, big law firms have not shifted. Now that the economy is kind of back on the uptick, they've not shifted back to pre-2008 business. They are there to stay. So really, I didn't go into law school for the money, but a lot of people do. The legal profession is no longer an automatic $100,000 check the day after you graduate from law school. It is you are going to be doing good if you're in the 40s, 50s, 60s range, straight out of law school, with a big, probably student loan debt over your head. And maybe if you're at the top of your class, you can get a big law firm job with a big law firm salary. Otherwise, you're going to be working your way up from that kind of 40s, 50s, 60s, and then on an upward trajectory. So the market itself hasn't really changed, but the economy being good is always good. So I mean, it's definitely better than it was. It's just that hiring structures have kind of changed permanently. The other question was, so the second part of that is law schools. Once people figured out that the legal profession was not what it was always meant to be, stopped going to law school. They got smart and they stopped going to law school. So that also is on an uptick, but it is not changed back to the way that it was pre-2008. Law schools are desperate for applicants. So it used to be the Georgetowns and the kind of not Ivy League, the Vanderbilts, not Ivy League, but really kind of in that upper tier of law schools, will now take students that they didn't used to take. And lower level law schools, not in quality, but just kind of in, like Belmont just opened up 5 years ago. They have a really good law school. Don't tell the people across the street that I said this, but they've got a really good law school, and they will give really big scholarships to quality applicants that could go to a UT or a Vanderbilt or a Georgetown, because they are able to attract talent with big scholarships. UT, desperate for applicants, so LSATs that they maybe didn't used to take 10 years ago, they are kind of taking now. So it's really an applicant's market in the law school world, which is great for you guys, just as long as you're aware that once you're on the other side of law school, the job market is not what it used to be. So it's kind of pros and cons.
Piggybacking off a little bit, maybe don't have it quite as abysmal, but I mean, no one knows what the future holds. Like, no one knows. So it pays to be smart and realistic. And going into law school, I heard both sides. I heard, you're going to make so much money when you get out. You're never going to find a job. I just made the most smart decisions that I could within my means. So, for example, I moved back home. No one wants to do that when they're in their mid-20s. I, luckily enough, had parents in the area. So I moved back home for 3 years. I applied for every GRA position I could possibly make myself seem like I could get. And I actually ended up getting a not law position in the library working on TRACE, which is Tennessee Research and Creative Exchange. I didn't even know it existed, but trace.edu if any of you want free research. But it was it's actually the college repository, and so I managed it, which gave me some weird different experience, but also paid my law school for 2 years. So that helped keep my debt as minimum as possible. By doing that, I did take some risks because I wasn't able to do some of the other things my friends were doing, like some of the internships that required too much time that I couldn't give it because I had this 20-hour a week GA position. But to me, it was more important to have the least amount of debt possible so that I could make smart decisions. The other thing I was gonna say, like he said, like be realistic about your starting salary when you get out of law school. You might get lucky, you might not, but just understand like what the financial consequences of your loans are gonna be, have a plan. Now if you're planning to go into government law straight out of law school, you might not be making a lot, but there are a lot of government forgiveness programs. I am actually eligible for it now, but now by the time I would make 10 payments or 10 years of payments, it wouldn't really help me at all, so I'm just staying on my schedule. But that is an option, so you can look into that. Like I do know some people that racked up quite a bit of debt, but because they went and did a field that was in government, they're able to handle it just fine. So that is an option. And then the other thing, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, just about big law firms. I mean, they are still there, those jobs are still there, and you can make over 100, but you have to be the top of your class, you have to know some people, and you're gonna be working 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
So you have to be realistic about what's important to you, what you want. I didn't wanna work 80 hours a week, so that's why I never even wanted to make that money because I didn't wanna put in the work. I've heard it said that, yeah, you're making good money, but you're working 2 jobs, that's what I've heard. So
You
that
don't have
wasn't.
time to spend the money that you make.
Yeah. But it's still there, but it is competitive, and you've got to figure out. Oh, that was my other point. Was it's not just are you smart on paper. I also know some people who went to law school that were brilliant, but they had no people skills and they had no sales skills. And if you don't have people skills and you don't have sales skills, you're not going to go anywhere. Because at the bottom of the day, no matter what you're doing in the law, it's mostly a sales job, especially if you're still in private practice. Not so much for me anymore, but I still have to have people skills. So that's very, very important.
And I'll say, first of all, if you can and if you want to, stay in state for your law school if you're going to law school, because in-state employers will pick in-state law students. Now, if you go to a DC law school, that's good for DC jobs, but and you know, you can make it work, but typically a good rule of thumb is in-state law schools lead to in-state jobs. So if you go to South Carolina Law School, you're probably going to end up in South Carolina for a job. So don't go somewhere for 3 years unless you want to stay there. Second of all, I made really good grades in undergrad, and I thought I'll make really good grades in law school, and I did not. When you get to law school, it is full of everybody like you. Everybody's ambitious, everybody's a type A personality, and everybody's really smart and does a really good job. And the people that are really smart and don't do a good job are so smart that they don't have to do a good job because they still make good grades. So when we talk about, you know, if you're at the top of your class, you could get a big law firm job. That's true, but just because you're at the top of your class now doesn't mean you'll be at the top of your class in 3 years. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So just go in with that realistic attitude of what translates in high school and college doesn't necessarily translate in law school. So.
Can I have 2 more things? On that note, I was actually in the top of my class at the beginning, and it still didn't get me a job at a big law firm, so it is connections too.
Yeah.
I actually had better luck when I dropped tremendously down the rankings, so like you said, and you're graded against the rest of your classmates. You all might be doing 100s, like A+ work, but it doesn't matter. They have to, like your first year of law school, they have to rank you. So that's why it's difficult. I feel like we had a particularly smart class too.
I'll go with that.
Did you guys compete against one another?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
She smoked me, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
So.
not
I was on that law
semester.
school path, and I was like, you know what, competition, I'm over it. So I decided that was not for me.
It's a little bit weird because you don't get to choose your professors.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like your professors like you. It's a little bit of luck. It's a little bit of everything. So the grading system, I kind of actually disagree with completely. But so connections. But my other point is he said something about Belmont. I actually had a full ride to Duncan, but Duncan was not ABA approved. If you know anything about law schools, you have to go to an ABA approved school to take the bar in any state. Some states, like I think Tennessee, will accept you from any Tennessee law school, even if it's not ABA approved. I wasn't 100% sure I was going to stay in Tennessee, so it was important to me to have the option to take other bars. So that's why I wanted to go to an ABA-approved school. But if you you're not leaving Knoxville, or you're not leaving Tennessee, yeah, look at some of these other law schools, because they can offer you a lot better deals than maybe UT can. No. But it's important to you to have options.
Sure. So my next question, y'all can just kind of popcorn this, you don't have to go down the row, is a little bit about misconceptions. This has already been addressed in some different ways, but what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about careers in government, politics, and law? Either that you thought going in, or that you just hear from people that you were like, it's not actually like that, and I just want to correct it. Anyone can chat.
I'll say for government, it's laziness, right?
I was going to say that too.
Everybody knows this.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bureaucratic mentality, I guess, in the government, and I'm not going to say there's not lazy employees out there, but it's certainly a stereotype, and it's not necessarily an accurate one. Except maybe Knox County is, but no, sorry, that's a dig for Knox County. But
I agree with that. I got that a lot when I started this job. They're like, oh, you don't have to work on Mondays and Fridays anymore. No, there are still days where I am, like today, like this week, like this whole month, I've been running like a chicken with my head down.
Yeah.
And it's not, now, I will say since I've been in private practice, I am really, really happy to have my current job, because like private practice is a whole different story. You do have to be, like I can leave my work at home and go home and just relax. I was like almost always on call at my old job, and Sunday evening at 8 o'clock, we need you to come, we have trial tomorrow, we've got to get this stuff finished. Some of that is fun, some of that is exhausting. So there is better work-life balance, I think, in a government position than maybe like a private lawyer.
Sure.
But you're still working hard.
for engineering jobs, I see that a lot. There's a lot of engineers, civil engineers and stormwater and traffic engineers that work for the city that a private firm engineering is ridiculous. You can go get your 40 hours and make pretty good money. Go home when you're done engineering for a while.
I would say the legal profession isn't as glamorous as TV makes it out to be. So I mean, Lindsay worked in a law firm and probably wasn't glamorous.
No, 90% of your work was staring at the computer, researching, writing, or reviewing documents. You're very rarely in court, what I was doing.
So, and I'm in court pretty frequently, and it is definitely not glamorous, the counties that I go to and the people that I deal with. So you feel like you need a good bath at the end of the day. So it is not the, every hair is still in place, drinking my nice Jack and Coke at the end of the day. It's a little frazzled and drinking my Jack and Coke.
A common misconception with congressional offices is that a staff member can, the constituent calls with their issue, the staff member picks up the phone, calls, and that matter is resolved in about 3 minutes. That is not at all the case. What was really surprising for me is just how, in a congressional office, if it is not on paper, then there's nothing that's being done about it. For all of our constituent cases, the constituent writes in, they explain their matter, what it is they're requesting the congressman's assistance with, and then we forward that, we'll review that, forward it to our congressional liaison, and it's just a paper trail. It goes across many desks, many people will have to sign off on that final letter. So I have cases right now that have probably been going on for some of them maybe 4 or 5 months. So communicating that to the constituents is sometimes difficult, and I understand why, because a lot of times it's very important issues, and the congressional office is usually their last resort, so they want an answer yesterday, and just communicate to them that it'll probably be a few months from now and we may have an answer for you. So that was, just seeing how that paper trail is very much a thing in a congressional office. Communicating that to them, that we can't just pick up the phone and fix it like that. I wish we could. It would make my job easier. But
That's probably true for all of us, I would say. Nothing happens quickly, ever.
I don't know.
One of the things we struggle with people coming from the private sector is they're used to just buying something or just doing something. And you absolutely cannot do that ever in government. There's always a committee and 4 or 5 regulations, and consult somebody and then consult somebody else and then get 3 approvals, and then it's nothing
That's
just
somewhat
happens.
true for higher ed also.
It's still public sector.
Yes, it is, exactly. Yeah. So things happen a little more slowly at times.
So if you work for yourself, does it help with that?
There's one approval, one bit. You do go out and just buy it.
Just do it, yeah.
And I, just to backtrack a little bit, I will say I do deal with crazy people, but it's really rewarding, the type of work that, so I didn't want to sound too cynical. It really is nice to help people. Like, I help people, criminal defense. I can go to Nashville and lobby and see my bill passed. It's a tangible success that I can see happen. So in any law you're helping somebody, whether it's a big business or a criminal defendant, you're helping somebody or something. So I will say that it is a rewarding experience to be an attorney, and I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Okay, so my last question before I open it up to our students for questions is, what advice would you have, what's a piece of advice that you would like to give students that are interested in a career similar to yours? Anything that you want them to know, or some piece of advice that you wish you had known?
So when I was trying to get a job in the government, I felt very stressed out because I did not have the resume that most people had. I did not have all that experience that most people had. It was something I really wanted to do, but I didn't quite know how to get there. And so I started, like I said earlier, I kind of tried to figure out how to sell myself the best I could, but then I just started applying to anything that looked interesting, and there was this one job in Denver that I really wanted. I also passed the bar in Denver, so that's why, I was thinking about moving there for a while, but, so a lot of my jobs were Denver and Knoxville. But I applied to a job in Denver, and I remember the chief attorney wrote me back and said, oh, I'll let you know by such and such date. Well, when that date came, I hadn't heard from him. And this is the only time I've ever done this, but now I will recommend it. I reached out and I said, they always tell you to do that.
No,
I'm
just
terrified to do it.
I know, it's hard.
But I did it. I reached out and I said, I just wanted to know if you had made a decision, and if you hadn't, could you give me constructive criticism? Well, to my surprise, he wrote me back and said, out of hundreds of applicants, you were actually the top 10, which was encouraging, because had I not written him that, I would have thought it just got tossed in the bin and not looked at. And on top of that, he told me that the person that did get chosen, of course, had interned there in the past, but he also gave me some critiques about my resume and how I ought to put together, and so I took his advice to heart and made some changes to it. And then he also, the most important advice he told me was, do not stop, keep trying. He said it's all about being at the right time, at the right place. He said eventually you're going to be exactly what somebody's looking for. And that was in February, and I did not get my current job till September. I think it took about a year of just applying to different things. So that's my best advice. Do not give up. Sell yourself the best you can, and eventually you're going to be in the right place at the right time.
So AmericanStationery.com. Invest in your own set of personal stationery. I know that's
Sounds about
crazy,
right.
but our chief of staff to this day tells me that he remembered this little note that I sent him, and that's why he called me. I can't remember for the life of me what I even said in the note. It was after I went in, we talked about the internship, and then I said it was like 6 months before I got a phone call saying that they were going to be putting someone in that position. But I just sent a little note, and that kind of separated myself from all the other people that had interviewed. And in the day and age that we live in, so many people are, they're sending their emails and they're sending stuff on social media and all this technology stuff, which is great, but sitting down, writing a little thank you note can really make a difference. And just marketing yourself, selling yourself, saying, you know, why you're interested in this position, they're going to remember that. Sometimes we'll have interns who, well, or people that are expressing interest in the internship, like they might email me or someone else a thank you note. It's in my email inbox. I'll send them something back really quick, acknowledging their email, but it's in that hour, the first hour of my morning when I'm going through like the 50 emails that I have. So I see it for that minute and then I pretty much forget about it. Versus if you send that physical piece of correspondence, it's going to be on my desk. Eventually, I'm going to file that somewhere. I'm going to see it 3 or 4 times. So that can really, you know, help you stand out. The second thing, just find those older people who can mentor you. That is like, I can't stress that enough. There are older people in politics who I kind of built those relationships with, who I know, you know, if I hadn't kept those relationships, and they've been through the trenches, they've had their experiences, they want to help young people. So finding those older mentors is very important. And yeah, that's really personal stationery and older mentors.
Thank
There
you.
you go. I would say just don't get discouraged, and don't ever think you're too good for anything. Don't ever be too proud. I think that the economic downturn we've all discussed many times helped a lot of people get humble. You know, we hired a lot of qualified engineers to be entry-level technicians. You know, we had people with master's degrees that were getting coffee for other people. You know, you get in where you can, and you find the opportunity where you can, and you're never too good for anything. If somebody's going to give you an opportunity, you take it and you be happy about it. And think you're too good. And then there will be times when you get passed over for things that you think you earned or you think you deserved. Happens to everybody. Happened to me several times. But you know, I think in government or in politics sometimes the lower level jobs are pretty merit based for the most part. But when you get to the upper level jobs, you're talking about political appointments in local government. Sometimes you may work hard at a job and feel like you've earned something, and then a new mayor comes in and brings a friend and you know, and they're going to be the new director. That happens, and you can't pout about it or whine about it. You just get to know that person, work with them well, and maybe eventually your turn will come. Keep a good attitude about it. You know, you're going to keep yourself in the game, and if you don't, you'll be out of the game very quickly.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, I could print War and Peace on every rejection letter that I've gotten from employers and other people like that. If you go into the legal profession, it's full of rejection. The first year of law school, whether you're the first in the class or the last in the class, it's nothing but rejection and red marks on your papers. And I mean, the whole point of law school is to break you down and build you up the way that they want to build you up. So I think having your mind the reason that you're doing whatever you're doing, whether it's law or politics or whatever, because I have lost my fair share of political campaigns too. Know why you're doing something and stick to that when the times get tough to get you through. And because if you don't have a strong enough reason to do it, you'll wash out. But if you do, keep that in mind. And just like these guys have said, network, network, network. Your career is like your marriage. You never know when you're going to find the one. So the woman that got me the internship, I had no idea who her husband was, but it just happened. I have like Michael was saying, I have a guy that rents part of his office out to me now. He is my mentor. I don't pay him anything but rent, but the advice and the help and the times that he has bailed me out of problems are invaluable to me, and I met him at a Christmas party. And so, I mean, anything in life is like that. You just network, network, network. Go places that you're too tired to go, and things that you don't want to do, because you just never know, out of the hundreds of people that you meet day to day, who's going to be the one to get you where you need to go. And later in life, you never know who you're going to meet that you can help out and return the favor. So definitely just keep at it and know why you're doing things and meet good people.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to open it up to the floor to ask any questions that you may have. I didn't get into any like really technical aspects of their jobs or anything like that. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask for any of our panelists. Yes.
I have a question. So I just got back from Europe. I was there for a year getting a master's degree, and I graduated from UT poli-sci degree. I interned with Senator Corker twice. Plenty of experience, but not doing very well in the job search right now, which is very unfortunate. But I'm applying to several government positions, and they're all entry level, unfortunately. But it's taking forever. Like you'll get like an email like a week later. Have to do this first interview, like what they call them, surveys, and then you have to wait like a week after that. But I know you said just like keep doing it. But did you do anything part time during that?
I already had my job.
Okay.
They did not know I was applying. Well, one person in the firm did know. He was my like secret mentor, and he was fine. He was behind. So he was the contact I was getting as I was applying. So I was lucky in that regards. And I would suggest yes, no matter like if you have to go work at Starbucks to pay the bills, there's nothing wrong with that. It does take forever. I applied in I think April, and I had forgotten about it, and I got a call in September, and they were like, hey, do you want to come interview for this job? Once I had the interview, I was in within a month. But that is still quicker, because the court is exempt service, so I'm actually at will. I can get fired at any time. But if you're applying for like the other government positions, you have to jump through so many hoops to get there, and it can, if it's federal, is that what you're talking about?
State.
Oh, I don't know about
There's
state,
only
but
one federal.
the federal can take forever. The state, is it as long?
I tried to get on this with the state as well at one time. It was not fun. The city takes a long time.
I had a,
It
Feel better.
does. It does. It does.
I was saying, on that note, I actually applied for the General's office and Attorney General's office in Nashville, and I actually, like months later, got a phone call about interviewing for a job that I didn't apply for, but was still with the General's office, so you just never know. Like, somehow my resume was still there, and that particular person was interested, but I'd already taken this job, so I didn't go for that. But and that was another 5 months after, 6 months after I'd applied, so it's sort of, you just throw it into the void and see if you hear anything back.
I did work at Starbucks when I was in grad school.
That's my dream job. If I could make
It was
money.
not a bad job. And then I got an office job the place where my sister worked. It wasn't anything I wanted to do, but it was just some office work. And I did some timekeeping while I was there for payroll. And then I finished grad school, and then there's a job doing payroll for the city that came up. So I had no desire to do that, but my sister worked there, and she could give me a job, so that I got some skills there, and that turned into a career with the city.
That's what I'm trying to do now, but I've had 2 places tell me that I have too much education and that they feel like they could, I won't get paid what I deserve. And I'm like, well, I just want money,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
hate
okay.
it.
Being a millennial.
Just something right now.
Overqualified.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's all good advice. We can talk afterwards. So,
Oh, my other advice
Yeah.
is going to be use the career center.
Yeah.
I did not in undergrad. I probably should have. But in grad school, I heavily relied on our
Yeah.
career. And I don't think, my job was through an email, because they would send, if you were on the list, they would send the jobs out. And the job that I got, the clerking position, was through one of those positions that came up. But then I constantly went to them to this day. If they get in a job that makes them think of me, because I made friends with the career counselors, they will send me a still. So like they'll be like, oh, this makes me think of Lindsay. I'm gonna send it to her. So, and they're not sending that to everybody. So definitely use your career center.
yes, oh, in the back, sorry.
I guess mine was more geared towards Will's. Your situation sounds like really similar to mine.
Yeah.
I'm a junior poli-sci major with law school aspirations, and I probably went to as many law firms that I could around the city. I told them I would do whatever I had to do just to put something on the resume, and they're really not. sell myself really to these firms, or like, even being a runner.
Right.
You know, so I fear that by the time law school comes around, or a government position, that I might be able to.
Sorry, y'all. Someone went out the door. Keep talking. It's not, there's nothing wrong. Keep talking.
What would you recommend trying to get around that? Finding internships with poli-sci and, you know, not even being accepted to a law school yet, it's kind of, it's hard to sell yourself.
Yeah. Talk to me afterwards and I can give you some good email addresses. I think probably a good way, I can put you in touch with the people over at the Law School Career Center, and they have law firm connections out the wazoo. So they probably can shoot out an email for you and say, this guy is willing to do whatever. So that'd be a good connection. You know, if phone calls and emails don't work, show up at their door. There's not really an easy way to do it. I think just keep at it, and you never know from season to season. You know, they might need a summer person, or the person that they have this year might graduate and they'll need somebody next year. I think just be persistent, as annoying as that may seem, and counterintuitive. Just keep at it.
Do you have any particular interests? Like, is there a particular type of law you're looking at?
I just want to get some kind of experience really before, you know.
Another option is a lot of judges, like I know at least the state judges or even some of the municipal judges, they will take interns. I don't think they have to be in law school. I could be wrong on that, but that's something to look at. You might not get paid, but it's at least an experience, and that's something I wish I had done, was intern with a judge. So that's something to think of.
Yeah, I know a student that interned with the city of Morristown and a circuit court judge. So that is an option.
And our clerk's
As an
office
undergrad.
actually does internships too,
Yeah.
and I think so does the city one. So there's a lot of different options. You might not get paid, but like I said, it's a good first thing to put on your resume if you can get 10 hours a week to do it. So.
I think you could, sorry, I jumped in, I'm also a career consultant. I think you could also do more just like informational interviews. So instead of, and you can almost use that as job shadowing to have a lot of like, had an interview with this person, have an interview with this person. So that way you're gonna get a ton of information and kind of show that as job shadowing. Or you could look at kind of relevant types of experiences that you're gonna get transferable skills. So maybe like a research assistant position for some sort of policy or some sort of anything like that, because I'm sure research is a huge component of whatever you're gonna do in law. So things like that to think about as well.
Persistence really is key. Our current intern, if you go to duncan.house.gov, that is where most constituents write in, and easily thousands a week. And all those emails have to be sorted through. She was expressing interest in the internship, and when I was training her to use our computer, we were looking at her, basically every constituent has a file, and we were looking at hers, and it showed like it was 4 or 5 times that she'd emailed and not received a response. Finally, she started calling. The chief of staff, the office manager, got her foot in the door. She's now our intern. But there were those 4 or 5 emails she sent that were just kind of out there in cyberspace, hadn't been reviewed yet. Someone probably looked at them, but kind of put it on this list of priorities over here. And, you know, she's now our intern. So it's easy to send those emails and think, oh, they hate me, I'm not going to bother them anymore, but start calling or show up.
Attorneys are busy too. They are busy. It is probably a good idea to just show up. Say, I just want 3 seconds of your time. Do you have any opportunities? If they say no, just say thank you for your time, appreciate it, leave. No one's going to get upset with that.
Yeah.
And if they do, then you don't work for them anyway.
Did you have a question before I go back? Okay.
Me?
Yes.
Yes. So Joe's kind of answered part of mine, but to either of you all, I'm thinking about doing some sort of paralegal services for an attorney. Do you think that's worthwhile?
Yeah.
Because I talked to some people and they said a lot of things you learn doing paralegal work are things that you don't learn in law school and they're very important.
Yeah.
So you think it's beneficial?
Yeah.
Yeah, my my law firm made me immediately do all my own paralegal stuff, and I was like, oh, I did not learn any of this in law school. How do I file a document? Like, they don't teach you that in law school. So, yeah, it's helpful.
Fantastic. And then would I also be able to speak to you after?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So he works for himself, so.
Did you have a follow-up? Sorry.
Yeah, it was more just like, I've definitely tried, go in person, do everything I can, but I've also applied to as many internships, congressional internships, but I'm not a 4.0 student, I'm definitely not lacking, but it's hard for me to stand out just on a piece of paper at this point, even if I send those letters or make those calls. So it's really just finding experience, not even regardless of pay. It's just been really,
I think,
Anyone in our career center?
no,
I
but
have a meeting tomorrow.
I think that, when you mentioned volunteering for like campaigns and things like that. That's like experience that you can get. They're gonna take you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, y'all have that. I don't know.
And I know Senator Corker, they're upstairs from us, I guess downstairs from Lindsay. I know most of their staff all helped on his campaign. Interns, of course, that's kind of a different story because even though in my case I did help on the campaign and then get the internship, a lot of those positions are filled with campaign staffers. And one thing, is there anyone interested in like a congressional position? Okay, so I'll talk to you guys. So this is kind of like the best kept secret on the hill. For retiring members or senators, a lot of those staff members are not going to be there until the day that the office closes. They'll begin looking to see what comes next. So if there are any, and it doesn't even really have to be Corker, Alexander, or Duncan. I mean, you can figure out across the country which members might be retiring, and if you have a connection with those offices, it's certainly going to help. But just going to their chief of staff and saying, I will literally do anything that you want me to, if that's answering calls, giving tours of the Capitol. Those retiring members, their staff start to dwindle because people are going other places. So just keep that in mind. I think that's the case for both really internships and like staff positions. So
Yeah. Sometimes I think if you feel like you don't have quite enough, it is a catch-22. Sometimes for internships, you need a little bit of experience to get an internship, but it doesn't have to be that kind of experience that you're necessarily thinking. So part-time jobs, student activities, involvement on campus, volunteering, mock trial, whatever, like all of that kind of thing, things that might be a little bit easier to get your foot in the door are things that you could get involved in to then kind of make that next step. But also, like y'all were all saying, sometimes you may not have that, but if you can make the right connection and talk to the right person, then if they like you, they might,
Do they still have the Nashville legislative internship
do.
programs? That's also, I didn't do it, but
Absolutely.
that's also a great resource. I guess the political science department,
Dr. Falls runs that.
yeah, has a great legislative internship program where they will place you with a state legislator for the winter. And it might mean relocating to Nashville, I don't know, but it's a really good program, and that's really good experience that probably won't lead to a job at its conclusion, but it's the kind of experience that will lead to other things and put you on the map somewhere.
Absolutely.
As far as making your resume stand out, like again, I just relate to that so hard because I had so much stress and anxiety of how I did not feel like I had I had good grades, but I wasn't 4.0 either. I didn't feel like I had the experience that everyone else had, and I constantly was overwhelmed by that, but it was just about using the little things I could, like my experience writing and my experience with 4-H, which sounds really nerdy, but when I was really young, I did a bunch of 4-H stuff, and
4-H, that's it.
and so like I was treasurer, and I
Yeah.
had some different leadership
Exactly.
roles with that, and that was high school, but it still helped me even in college, so I could like really get the experience. So you just have to figure out a way, and like they might be able to help you brainstorm to sell yourself as different and to sell yourself as valuable and not just be a standout. Another thing that the guy that wrote me back told me he liked my cover letter because it was honest. I have no idea how it was, but possibly because of some of the things I'm saying. Like I didn't just tell him what I thought he wanted to hear. I told him a little bit about me and why I would be good for the position, and so you just got to figure out how to spin yourself the right way.
Absolutely.
I'll also tell, and if you have a notepad, write this down. I don't want to say it 50 times after the session's over. Doesn't matter what way you lean politically. The Heritage Foundation is a typically conservative group in Washington. They have a fantastic job board for everything from entry-level internships for college students all the way up to legislative directors, chief of staffs in DC. And so that's a great resource, and I'm sure the ACLU or somebody that would be kind of left-leaning would have a similar job board, but that's an incredible resource. They send it out twice a week, and it has hundreds of internships and jobs that you can just shoot resumes out to. So Google stuff like that, find groups on, and typically, I mean, those kinds of people will hire from their political spectrum, and it's kind of hard to fake your allegiance or your experience in that area, but find, whichever side you want to go towards, and those are really good resources if you want to just start shooting out resumes.
And that's another good point, is that a lot of these government attorney jobs are not on Indeed, they're not on whatever. So, like, I signed up for the state government, I signed up for the county government, I signed up for Denver's county, and then they'll send you any jobs that come open within your parameters, and that's how I found out those jobs. And that's how I got my job that I have now. So, actually, no, the way I got my job now was some Google search that somehow landed onto this. Like, this job was not even advertised very well, so you just don't know what you're going to run into. Don't just stick with
A
like.
lot of them are not advertised very well in all of these sectors.
It's
They're
probably how I
just
got my
not,
job.
yeah.
We
So
have
you
no
kind of
idea.
have to dig
You do.
a little bit.
So don't get frustrated. They're
Yeah.
out there. You just have to find them.
Yeah.
That's part of the challenge.
I don't think.
Any final questions? We're about out of time, but anyone else, anybody, questions? Well, let's give our panelists a hand. Thank you so much for your presentation.
I had to go to law school.
Yeah, he's trying. A few people, yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank y'all. I guess if you have final questions, you can come up and ask the panelists. But we're about out of time. So thank you. Oh my God. That is.
I know, and everybody's wanting to, but now
Thanks for coming.
yeah, Missy just wants to go, but I would have.
Thank
I meant to tell her.
He was working at Baylor.
Oh, I know, I know where you are. And actually, you're familiar, so I'm like,
Oh, you're over, yes.
No, that's okay. We probably talked.
I'm welcome.
anytime I
Hey,
have
sir.
just trying to work with all the research. And then you get your time and like.
Yeah, I work at UTK, so I work with a lot of
We're all just like, we wish we could have done journalism or like something else, cause like poli-sci and international relations, I'm like, it's not practical, like I can't go to, polling and like, more like numbers, I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Yeah, well, it's like, I have a poli-sci degree, but now I focus more on obviously the international and the foreign affairs, so, it's like, I try to use my PhD